I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Kelly Perdew. Before I do, I just want to point people to Kelly. I always like to point out a couple of episodes that would be interesting, and everyone should check out the David Mann and Derek Smith interview I did, and that's why I have Kelly on today. Introduction from the Firefly Group, and check them out. And I was looking through your list of portfolio companies, Kelly, and one of them, it looks like, was acquired by Atari. So one of the interviews I had was with the founder of Atari, Nolan Bushnell, who is Steve Jobs' mentor. And people should check out that interview. He talks about when Steve Jobs offered him 33% of Apple for $50,000 and why he said no. And I'm wondering if you have one of those stories based on your investments. You're like, oh, kicking myself. Do you have a kicking myself story?
I have a kicking myself
story.
Before
I formally introduce you, go ahead. Yeah. Go off with the
kicking. Great. I love Nolan too. I've known him for probably 15 years here in the LA ecosystem. He's awesome. I mean, how many people can, say I founded companies like Atari or Chuck E. Cheese?
Exactly.
He's a very dynamic individual and still going strong.
So go ahead with a kicking yourself story, and I'll formally introduce you in a second. But
so my as an investor, you're going to miss deals here and there, right? But I got invited on this really, really hot deal in this new space, called augmented reality, and it was the only way I could get in. And this is an angel investment, so like a $25,000 check or something, but the meeting where I was going to go cement it and be able to, write my check into it was in Orange County on a Friday afternoon, pre-COVID, obviously. This was a while ago. And for anybody who lives in or around the Los Angeles ecosystem, saying anything that has to do with, more than 1 mile away from your location on a Friday afternoon in Los Angeles is like saying that's the rest of your day. And I did not go meet with the founder of Oculus on a Friday afternoon. to probably have put my $25,000 check in that I didn't do the multiples of the math on it, but it was an extraordinarily large dollar amount of missed opportunity and kicking myself.
I'm researching the Oculus 2 right now to purchase. Did you look into, or do any of your family own Oculus?
Yeah, I don't typically give product recommendations, but I've heard good stuff.
Okay. Yeah. I'm really curious of where do you think, from a marketing perspective, I could see a lot of opportunity in this virtual reality world. Do you see the same as an investor, or I'm curious what you see with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are some things that are going to have to change before your average consumer, gets to scale. One of which is, the equipment, right? There's a company that we invested in out of Moonshots Capital Fund 1 called Red 6. And Red 6 is solving a very big problem that the United States Department of Defense has, and that's training fighter pilots. It's incredibly expensive, and we don't actually own any of the kind of bad guys aircraft, especially with current capability. So it's very difficult to give a pilot an actual combat situation where they might have to go in like dogfight, basically. And you can simulate a lot of things in a simulator on the ground, but it's different when you're pulling 4 or 5 Gs in a dogfight. I don't say that with experience. I'm saying that from having talked to actual fighter pilots. And what Red 6 has done has been able to create an augmented reality capability in a dynamic environment.
That's cool.
So the hit on augmented reality is you cannot walk around outside and experience augmented reality, right? Because it's got to be a closed, contained area where all the different points in the room and you can measure so that you can portray the right video image for where your head is in context to the rest of the room. And there's probably not much more of a dynamic place in the world than in the cockpit of a fighter jet. And Red 6 has been able to demonstrate that they can show an enemy aircraft in augmented reality in the fighter's visor in the display. And that's a few steps away from, average consumer walking around with glasses on and using the computer in your mobile device to be able to power that, a la, the Terminator seeing the overlay walking around outside and really seeing it in real time with the right spatial dimensions.
Yeah.
And there are all sorts of problems that have, Magic Leap has tried to solve those with billions of dollars over the years, but our little tiny Red 6 with a specific client in mind has been able to solve it in one of the most dynamic environments in the world. So it is coming. Is it 1 year away, 3 years away, 5 years away? I'd say it's probably in the less than 5, but more than 2.
Yeah. Yeah. Even doing research with some of the games, there's, training games for flying an airplane. And I don't even want to begin to learn to try and do that. I just want to be totally ignorant when I go up in the air, and I don't want to know that. I don't want to be actually me driving it and crash it and not be worried and have bad
so
dreams.
No control issues for you. When
I'm definitely, not going to get that game, but, I'm going to formally introduce you, Kelly. Before I do, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25, which I co-founded with my business partner, John Corcoran. At Rise 25, we help businesses. Basically, we are an easy button for them to run and launch their podcast for them. Over the past over 10 years of podcasting, it's been one of the best things I've done. I always like, Kelly, giving to my relationships, and I've seen no better way to bring people on my platform, the people I admire, the thought leadership I want to put out in the world for other people, and having them demonstrate that on my podcast. So if you have questions and you are looking to start or launch a podcast for your business, go to rise25.com and check it out. And, a shout out to Bunker Labs also. And we have a vet, I know you like military background in the founders and entrepreneurs and CEOs that you invest in. And we had a veteran entrepreneur scholarship for when there were events. And we partner with companies like Bunker Labs, and we're able to have, veteran entrepreneurs come to the events that we have with other entrepreneurs and learn from each other. So check that out. It's at rise25.com/mission. And it's, both of my co-founder, my grandfathers have military experience, and they are a big driving force from what we do as business owners. So Kelly Perdew, in short, God, Kelly, I could go on for like 20 minutes about your background in the companies, but I'll keep it short. I'll let you tell the rest. But you've served in pretty much every capacity: founder, board member, CEO, COO, CFO. You've raised institutional financing. You've grown businesses. You've downsized businesses. You've sold businesses. You've had 8-figure exits. You've been a board advisor, board role in the past of Pandora and LinkedIn. There's a laundry list of others. Operating roles in so many other Fast Point games. So you speak from experience as far as talking about games, which ended up selling to WePlay, and angel investments in so many ones, which we'll talk about. IDMe, Nimble. I've heard of Nimble and used Nimble too. And there's a laundry list of others. To boot, you won the Apprentice 2. You're the only one that year who Donald Trump did not say you are fired to, I imagine. And to boot, MBA, JD from UCLA, and graduated from West Point. So Kelly, thanks for joining me.
I'm excited to be here.
What was the impact of winning the Apprentice? If you maybe just fast forward you press fast forward on a video and it goes through kind of really quickly. After the Apprentice, how did that impact you? What did you do? What were kind of the fast forward after that?
Yeah, for sure. So, The Apprentice was a reality show. So I want to, and it's basically legally, it's a game show where you win a prize at the end of it. And there's a first place and a last place, and there's a graduated scale of payment. And my prize was, 12 equal installments of like 250 grand, total of 250 grand paid by my then employer, Donald Trump, Enterprises. And I moved to New York City, and I worked with him for about 14 months. I stayed an extra 2 months because I learned a lot from him on media management. And I got to do some things that I otherwise probably would not have done. I published a book as an author on applying military leadership principles to business. I hosted a show on the military channel called GI Factory, kind of a dirty jobs, if you will, for military equipment, vehicles, and weapon systems, which was awesome to get to go into all those factories and see exactly, all the people that are there making it and how they're all made. But I'd say that the biggest impact that winning that show had on me was I was able to take that, 15 minutes of fame, if you will, that, got extended out to about a year because I was in New York City. I got to, believe it or not, really build out in a strong way my LinkedIn network. And I actually, at the time the show was on, negotiated an advisory role with LinkedIn. This is 2004, where, I talk about LinkedIn in the book that I published. I was having, 1 million visitors a week to my website, kellyperdew.com. And I parlayed that into some advisory shares in LinkedIn, and actually started using LinkedIn, for its intended purpose, and really networked to where pretty quickly I hit the 30,000 direct connection number. And for all of our portfolio companies, for the companies that I was starting and running at the time, I am able to leverage that network pretty extensively, whether it's through recruiting talent or business development relationships. If you have the kind of winner of The Apprentice, you're a VC and you're investing capital, and I'm a military veteran, and I do an outreach to somebody and say, hey, I've got a military veteran founder over here who's in cyber, hey, CIO of whatever, Sprint. Can somebody on your team talk to him? It's a pretty high response rate. We're at like 85% plus response rate. So it's for me, it has turned into an incredibly valuable tool. And as part of that deal where I was the advisor to LinkedIn, they wanted me to be the face of LinkedIn. And I don't know, I'm not sure how many people remember this, but they used to every couple of weeks put a famous person at, what their profile looks like up, like, Guy Kawasaki's or whoever. And Kelly Perdew, winner of The Apprentice, was the face of LinkedIn for like, a brief split second.
I want to see a screenshot of that. I got to look that up.
I know I've got one somewhere, but in any event, that has had what I believe to be an incredibly powerful, lasting effect on, my ability to help the entrepreneurs that we engage with.
Yeah. I want to talk about, more about some of the investments in Moonshots, but obviously we have to ask about what, working with Donald Trump, what that was like. I mean, when we're talking about the political climate right now, it's been very interesting compared to when you knew him then, so a lot has changed since then.
My business partner, Craig Cummings, describes that winning The Apprentice is the gift that keeps on giving. I have stayed kind of very center of the road politically and talk only about my my personal interactions with him during that year. And this was 2005, right? So this is 16 years ago. Incredibly dynamic, absolutely a deal junkie. I mean, pretty much what you saw transpiring over the last 4 years, is not afraid of making a split second decision in the moment based on gut. And then, I guess retracting or thinking about it or getting advice or influence and changing his position later. But I'd say the thing that I thought was pretty amazing to watch, and when he, announced that he was seriously in contention and running, I was like, be careful, because he absolutely understands how to manage media. And I watched that occur. If you'll remember, there were different, seasons of The Apprentice. There was a Martha Stewart Apprentice. There were, it was pretty hot in the reality world for a while. I think about 30 million people watched my finale, so half a Super Bowl. So it was pretty big. He would randomly pick a fight to get media attention. Like he fought with somebody on The View, and it came out like completely out of left field. And I just watched it transpire like 2 weeks before the next season of The Apprentice started. And his knowledge and understanding of what would be responsive in the media was amazing. And I took that lesson of watching that. And I think about it, and I talk about it with our founders. Marketing is incredibly important on what you're doing. You may have the best product in the world, but if nobody knows about it, it doesn't help. So if you're not thinking competitively about how you're positioned in the marketplace and how you make noise about that, you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah. So, who are some of the people you were able to meet because of that show? I remember, earlier today, I just watched, there's a 10-minute version. You can watch like the whole season in 10 minutes. And so I was like, I wonder really what happened. And there were people on. I mean, they had the owner of the Patriots.
Robert Kraft.
Yeah. So who are some of the people you were able to meet because of?
Pretty spectacular interviewing with him. And he had the trophy sitting there on the desk next to him at the time. He happened to be in possession of the trophy at the time. But Dawn Hudson was then she was the president of North America for Pepsi. Ace Greenberg, absolutely, iconic figure in the finance world. And, he said when he was given his advice to Donald on the last 4 of us that he interviewed, I mean, they were all very, nice about what they said about me, but he said, Donald, Kelly is exceptional in that not only having gone to West Point and served in the military, does he know how to lead, but I think for this role working with you, he also knows how to follow, which was an interesting comment that proved prescient, right? for everyone. But yeah, throughout that next year, being in New York City and having had that many people watch, I met people from all walks of life. I met, other billionaires from real estate. I met TV personalities. I was on Jay Leno show. The stuff that I got to do was literally, it's that split second, but it's good. It's good amazing. Photos. It's good memories. I show the kids and they laugh, and it's just a flash in a pan. Really, really lucky experience to be able to do something like that.
It's amazing. What was the most challenging project that because you worked on a lot of things, it sounded like, from launching like Trump Ice, the water, to working on the real estate, it talked about their suit company. I mean, they had their hands in so many different companies. What was the most challenging?
Well, I'll tell you what was pretty fascinating on the way in was, so I showed up for the first day of work. I think the show finale was in like December 14th or the middle of December. And then first day of work was ostensibly like the first Monday after New Year's, right? Whatever that was, January 4th or whatever. And so I showed up and everybody's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I won. I came to, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I ended up, on Fifth Avenue in the building, figuring out what to do. So it was kind of a figure it out on my own and see what I could come up with. And the first thing I asked for was I wanted to see the portfolio. I'm like, who manages the portfolio? Because he's got his name on buildings, board games, alcohol. Like, it's just, the litany of branding elements, right? Licensing deals. And then there's obviously the real estate business and all the other components. And figuring out what to work on, I think, was probably an interesting challenge, because there was a lot of other stuff that I wanted to get done while I was also learning about real estate, because I did not come from real estate. So I spent a lot of my time with George, who was kind of his right-hand consigliere, if you remember at the time, who by himself rolled up like 100 radio stations across the Midwest and sold them. That was like his, how he got to it. But he was like 80 at the time, maybe, and still took the train in, the subway in, polished his own shoes, like old school, very, fit like a glove with the kind of the West Point background that I had. So he was the commercial real estate guy. So he was like on the commercial brokers for renting out space. And I learned a lot from spending a lot of time with George.
Kelly, I could listen to your stories probably for the next few hours. I know we have limited time. And there's so many channels we can go over, but I wanted to hit on, more than that, but 2 portfolio companies you could talk briefly about, Gretel and IDMe. And first, just talk about the criteria, your selection criteria. There's a page, you can go to moonshotscapital.com and go to their selection criteria. And I'm wondering, overlaying those two? Were there any that they didn't hit of why you decided? And then we could talk about it, but anyone could check it out. Because if you're wondering, in thinking, well, maybe I am a candidate, I am a company, because Kelly probably gets lots of pitches. How many pitches do you think you get a month?
We're in between 100 and 150 a month. Depends on the month.
Yeah. So read this before maybe you pitch them to see if you're a fit.
Important to call out the criteria. And I will say, if Craig and I have looked back at our investments from the fund 1 and now in fund 2, and no company meets every one of the criteria elements. Okay. So we're like, but all of them meet a majority of the criteria elements. So when we're first and foremost, we're looking for extraordinary leadership. And what we mean by, like, nowhere in the world is millions of dollars spent training people in leadership per se, other than the military. So, and we happen to have a really good network there. So for background checking and getting data points on these individuals, it's phenomenal, not only for us, but for the entrepreneur who happens to have that military background. They can use their channel to find out about us, right? So when you meet up, if you've passed the sniff test both ways, there's already a level of trust, common background, shared vernacular that really accelerates that trust, which is super important when you're working with investors. So it's not exclusive. About half of our AUM has gone into teams with military veterans on them, but half of them haven't. We're just looking for that extraordinary leadership capability, first of all. And you asked about Gretel and IDMe specifically. So Gretel was founded by Alex Watson. And Alex, Craig and I, through the years, started as angels, writing those checks, then moved into leading syndicates, meaning we gather up other angels and invest those on syndicates on our own. We've done, I think, 40 of those now. And then we moved into committed funds where we could deploy capital with conviction when we decided to, and didn't have to go round up the capital to be able to execute and move that way. And we like to lead. We like to take that, lead position and invest, late seed rounds when there's a product moving, some annual recurring revenue in place. They know the dogs are kind of eating the dog food. Team's not completely set. Maybe pricing's not completely figured out. But Craig and I, with our operating experience, can help those founders accelerate. Because
you roll up your sleeves with the companies you invest in.
We do. Yeah. On the ones we lead, for sure. And sometimes when we like the entrepreneur founder and they make room for us in a deal that we like, we'll put money in, we'll still help. But when we're leading and taking a board seat, we take that very seriously and want to help the entrepreneurs not make the mistakes that Craig and I had previously made. So Gretel, Alex Watson, we previously had led a syndicate in the company that he ran before called Harvest AI. And Trinity Ventures came in while we were raising the syndicate and led a seed round. We rolled into that seed round. I went onto the board with Alex and the Trinity VC. We sold that company to Amazon in about 18 months. Successful. Alex went into Amazon. That product rolled out in AWS to much fanfare. Did a great job. I stayed on Alex. I knew when his end date was for his lockup period.
Your alarm go off on your phone.
and the 6 months before he was out, weekly, I pinged him. I slow water torture dripped him to death and said, where are we sending the next check for the next deal that's happening? And
big compliment to him.
In a very competitive race, we won leading the seed round. So we did a $3.5 million seed round into his next business with very accomplished co-founders, which made it super easy. And we did it. We had to go up in price, or else they were going to go to a tier 1, very well-known brand name fund and take a bigger amount. And we said, no, take less, good price, less dilution, build it out, and you can get a lot more from those big boys later. So Greylock quickly followed us into the seed and took the rest of the seed round. And then just at the end of 2020, led the A round. And Alex is a phenomenal leader, hardcore technology driven, brilliant, and has surrounded himself with a killer team trying to solve a very, very big problem. So that one was a known founder to us where there was a lot of trust. Again, trust is super important. And he was willing to work with us early to develop the prototype, get the beta out, and attract enough interest to raise a Series A round of financing.
I love it. I know we're right at the half hour. We could end it, or if you want to mention IDMe, that's fine.
Yeah.
So
the IDMe story is becoming a bigger and bigger deal. So Blake Hall, military veteran, Iraq war hero, Harvard Business School, wanted to build a company, and he talked to an investor in New York who put a little money into him while he was couch surfing, eating tuna fish and ramen, the normal entrepreneurial life, right? Not taking the job at McKinsey, not taking the job at Goldman, but pursuing this dream of building a company. And the investor in New York said, "Oh yeah, you're a military veteran. You should talk to Kelly in Los Angeles. He's a buddy of mine. He's a military veteran. He likes investing in military veterans." So I got the phone call that sounded like, a military guy. He goes, "Sir, this is Blake Hall." And I sat up a little straight, like I haven't heard this in a while. And we got to know each other, and then we became friends. And I have helped him all that I can, to the point he's such an amazing individual and leader on how he operates that I've learned more from him, I think, than he's learned from me. And we've evolved the company now. You have probably seen all of the uproar in the media about the fraud that has occurred on unemployment claims and the payouts that have gone to Russian, Chinese, Nigerian, organized crime, you name it, just massive amounts of fraud. And IDMe has built an online identity verification capability that's in use with the VA already over the years. This is one of those 11-year overnight success stories. They rolled out with California recently. They're enabling you not to spend 3 hours at the DMV by doing a whole bunch of stuff online.
Sign me up.
Yeah,
sign everyone up.
Not to go to the DMV.
Wow, right? That's the tagline.
$50, and then they think for a second. No, I'd pay $100. I'd pay up to $500 to never.
Billion-dollar company by solving the problem of going to the DMV.
So
yes.
USAA led the A round. FTV Capital led the B round. We're in the process of a really amazing next round of financing right now. And Blake is kind of the poster child for what we talk about in terms of, being able to execute, being coachable, understanding leadership, understanding that you need to surround yourself with people who do things better than you do. All of those things you read about in the books, the actual execution of those things is really hard to do. And he's been phenomenal at that. So, and I've been, a board member and mentor for the last 10 years. But the story there is there've been two pivots. So as an entrepreneur, you are going to have very, very, very tough times and tough days. And it's important for you to have investors, mentors, personal advisors, board members from the investor standpoint, and team members that understand that it is not all roses and rainbows all the time. But if you stick to it and stay smart and understand what's happening in the marketplace, you can create some incredible value.
Yeah. Kelly, I want to be the first one to thank you. It pains me to end this interview, but everyone should check out moonshotscapital.com. If you know of a company or you are a company that you think is a fit, check out their, what their criteria is, reach out to them, and just check out what their thought leadership. What I'm looking for, Kelly, is your next book. Like, I want to listen to or read your next book, whenever that is. So everyone check it out, and thanks for listening.
Awesome, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like $100 grand.